The saloon went dead quiet when she spoke. Every poker chip froze mid-air. Every cigarette hung unlit between trembling fingers, and even the piano player's hand stalled above the keys. Dust motes floated through shafts of lamplight as if the whole world had forgotten to breathe. The woman standing beneath the chandelier, dressed in scarlet silk that shimmered like flame, had just said something no one in Dead Man's Hollow had ever heard before. "You'll have to pay $15." She said to the Apache standing by the door. Her tone calm, deliberate, unshaken. The man she spoke to was tall, his skin bronzed by desert suns, his long black hair tied with leather. He wore no hat, no gun, and no expression. His eyes, dark, unreadable, locked with hers across the crowded saloon. Every man in the room tensed, hands inching toward holsters, because no Apache ever walked into town without trouble trailing behind him like a storm. Her name was Evelyn Marlowe, 30 years old and the richest widow west of the Pecos. She owned half the buildings that lined Main Street, the Velvet Spur Saloon, 2 ranches, a freight company, and the hotel. She'd inherited them all when her husband, the cattle baron Thomas Marlowe, died under mysterious circumstances. Some said she'd poisoned him. Others whispered the devil himself had claimed his due. Whatever the truth, Evelyn Marlowe had built her empire from ashes, and no man dared cross her until tonight. The Apache had come in silently, the way smoke enters a room. He didn't glance at the dancing girls or the gambling tables. He just stood there, boots caked with red clay, eyes scanning the faces of men who spat at his kind. The saloon's laughter had died the second he appeared. Then came the mockery. "Wrong door, savage," shouted a ranch hand near the bar. "We don't serve your kind here. Go back to your rocks and rattlesnakes." Another added, slamming his glass down. The Apache didn't move. His stillness was unnerving, the kind that made men nervous because it held power. Evelyn had been watching him from the balcony, her hand resting on the polished railing. She'd seen fear before dripping from the eyes of men who wore badges or hid behind whiskey, but this one carried no fear, only silence. And behind that silence, a story she could feel like heat off a campfire. When one of her bouncers, a thick-shouldered brute named Kane, moved to throw the Apache out, Evelyn descended the stairs. Her heels clicked against the wood, sharp as gunshots. The crowd parted for her, like the Red Sea for Moses. "Leave him," she said coolly. Kane hesitated. "Ma'am, he don't belong." I said, "Leave him." Evelyn walked right up to the Apache, her perfume faint but intoxicating jasmine, whiskey, and dust. The man met her eyes without flinching. "You've got a death wish walking in here," she told him softly. "This town don't forgive brown skin or quiet courage." He didn't answer. His gaze flicked to the door, then back to her. "Do you speak English?" she asked. A slow nod. "Then hear this," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "You'll have to pay $15 if you wish to spend one night with me." The room erupted. Laughter, gasps, a glass shattering against the floor. Someone cursed. Someone else said she'd gone insane. The Apache didn't move. $15, he said quietly, the words heavy with an accent. "For what?" Her lips curved faintly, but her eyes didn't soften. "Not for what you think," she said, voice calm as a loaded revolver. "For silence. And a story." A hush fell again. She turned slightly toward the others. "Any of you want to pay for that?" No one spoke. Evelyn faced the Apache again. "Come upstairs. You'll have a roof, a fire, and an ear that listens. If you've got the courage to speak." He studied her for a long moment, then reached into a worn leather pouch tied to his belt. He drew out 3 silver coins tarnished dull and set them on the bar. "This is all I have." Evelyn looked at the coins, then at him. "Then it'll do." She took a candle, motioned for him to follow, and climbed the staircase. Her red dress swayed with every step, her heels echoing through the stunned silence. The Apache followed, slow and deliberate, his shadow merging with hers against the walls. Down below, men exchanged uneasy glances. Some muttered that the lady had finally lost her mind. Others whispered wagers about whether the Apache would leave that room alive. But the bartender, an old man with one good eye, just wiped his glass and muttered, "Hell, boys, you don't know Miss Marlowe. When she names a price, it ain't for sin, it's for redemption." Upstairs. The door closed. The murmur below resumed, but softer, like thunder retreating into the distance. Inside that room, two people from different worlds faced each other across a small wooden table. A woman haunted by her wealth. A warrior burdened by lost dot, and between them, the beginning of something neither of them could have imagined. The sound of the door closing upstairs was soft, but it carried more weight than a gunshot. Below, the velvet spur buzzed with drunken curiosity and disbelief. But above, in the quiet of Evelyn Marlowe's private quarters, the world had narrowed to two people and one flickering candle. Evelyn set the candle on the wooden table, its flame trembling as if it, too, felt the tension between them. The Apache stood near the window, the dim light glinting off the turquoise beads and bone charms that hung around his neck. Rain clouds were gathering beyond the glass, smearing the horizon into gray. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated, then said in a low, gravelly voice, "Taza." Evelyn repeated it softly, tasting the sound. "Taza. It means the sun, doesn't it?" His eyes flickered toward her, surprised. "You know our words?" "Only a few," she admitted, drawing the curtains shut. "Enough to recognize beauty when I hear it." She turned back to him, studying the man who had walked into her saloon like a shadow from a forgotten war. His chest bore faint scars, some old, some newer. The kind men earned when they fought not for glory but survival. "Why did you come here, Taza?" she asked. "You had to know this town would spit you out before it served you a drink." He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the candle, the flame reflected in his dark eyes. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft creak of the floorboards beneath Evelyn's boots. She poured him a drink from a crystal decanter and slid the glass across the table. He looked at it but didn't touch it. "You don't drink whiskey?" she asked. He shook his head. "I drink only what keeps me alive." A faint smile curved her lips. "Practical. I admire that." Finally, he spoke, his voice low and even, every word deliberate. "I came here looking for a man." Evelyn's smile faded. "A man?" "Yes," he said. "He killed my brother." The words fell heavy between them. Evelyn's breath hitched. "Your brother?" "His name was Nanton," Taza said quietly. "He was 16. He was hunting deer near the edge of your land when he was shot in the back. The man who did it wore the brand of your ranch, Marlowe." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Her hand trembled slightly as she set her glass down. "That can't be," she said softly. "My men wouldn't," but the truth caught in her throat. She remembered Boone, the foreman she'd fired 6 months ago for cruelty, for stealing, for leaving bruises on anyone weaker than him. What did this man look like? She asked. Tia single quotes as eyes hardened. "Tall, yellow beard. Scar across his cheek?" "He laughed when my brother fell." Evelyn's shoulders slumped. "Boone." The name came out like a curse. Taza's gaze stayed fixed on her, unblinking, unreadable. "He rode this way 3 nights ago. I tracked him to your saloon." Her pulse quickened. "You mean he's still here?" "Maybe," Taza said. "But even if he's gone, he left his trail in your house of smoke." Evelyn looked toward the window, where the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly against the glass. Boone doesn't work for me anymore, she said, her voice tight. He betrayed me too. Taza tilted his head slightly. You defend him? Never, she said sharply. If what you say is true, he deserves what's coming. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Evelyn turned and opened a wooden chest near the fireplace. From it, she pulled out a revolver, well-polished, silver-barreled, engraved with the letter M. She spun the cylinder once and snapped it shut. You'll never find Boone without help, she said. He's got men, and they hate you more than they fear him. You'd be dead before sunrise. Taza stepped closer. The candlelight painted bronze highlights across his skin, every muscle shifting like coiled power. And what are you offering, rich lady of the town? Her eyes met his without flinching. A chance. You help me end Boone's hold on this town, and I'll help you get justice for your brother. Taza's jaw flexed. Why would you risk your name for me? Evelyn smiled bitterly. Because I've spent years hiding behind wealth and whiskey. I may be rich, but I'm still guilty, and guilt's a kind of poverty too. He regarded her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he nodded once. We find Boone. Then your debt and mine are done. Agreed. Outside, lightning forked across the dark plains. The thunder followed, rolling over the town like the growl of a beast waking from sleep. Evelyn set down her empty glass and moved toward the window again. They'll come for you if they find out you're here, she said quietly. This town doesn't forget what it fears. Taza's voice was calm, resolute. Then let them remember me well. The storm broke, wind rattling the shutters. Inside, the flame wavered but did not die, just like the uneasy alliance that had been born between a wounded warrior and a haunted woman. Neither of them knew yet how much that single night would cost. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. Neither did Taza. Rain hammered against the window until dawn, drumming on the roof like ghostly hoofbeats. The candle burned low, a single thread of smoke curling toward the ceiling. Evelyn sat near the hearth, her crimson dress loosened at the neck, a glass of untouched whiskey by her side. Across from her, Taza leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His expression still and unreadable. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was heavy. Alive, full of memories neither dared speak. When the rain eased, Evelyn finally spoke. Boone was my foreman for 3 years, she said quietly. He had charm enough to fool a preacher, but underneath, he was pure rot. I should have seen it sooner. Taza's eyes flicked toward her. You fired him. Yes, she said. After he beat one of my ranch hands nearly to death over a stolen horse. He called it justice. I called it madness. Taza's voice was low, cold as the steel of a knife. He called killing my brother justice, too. Evelyn turned to face him. Then you and I have a common enemy. He didn't respond. The firelight flickered over his bronze skin, highlighting old scars that told stories of survival stories she could only imagine. She'd known men who fought wars for money, for power. Taza fought for something else, something deeper. R-W-E-R. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the dying fire. He used my brand to cover his crimes. If word spreads that he killed a child while wearing my mark, I'll lose everything I built. Taza tilted his head slightly. You care about your fortune? She laughed bitterly. No, I care about what it cost me. I clawed my way out of hell to stand where I am. I won't let Boone drag me back into it. He studied her for a long moment. You speak like someone who's already buried too many ghosts. She met his gaze. Maybe I have. Taza's voice softened slightly. And yet you live among the men who made them. Evelyn's lips trembled with something between anger and regret. Because I learned to wear armor made of silk and smiles. It's how a woman survives in a town like this. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air between them felt fragile, as if a single word might shatter it. Then, faintly, through the walls, came a sound boot scuffing across the floorboards below. Voices murmuring. Evelyn rose instantly, her hand going to the revolver on the table. "They're early." Taza's brow furrowed. "Who?" "My ranch hands," she said. "Boone still has friends in this town. Drunk, desperate men who'd sell their mothers for a handful of silver." Taza moved to the window, peering through the curtain. Dawn light painted the muddy street outside. 3 men stood near the watering trough, their hats pulled low, rifles slung over their shoulders. "They watch," he murmured. Evelyn nodded. "They'll wait for Boone to arrive. He always comes before sunrise to collect what he thinks he's owed." Taza turned to her. "Then this night is not yet over." Before she could respond, a gunshot cracked through the morning. The glass shattered beside her head, spraying shards across the floor. Evelyn ducked, heart pounding. Taza was already moving. He pulled her down, covering her with his arm as another bullet tore through the window frame. The warmth of his skin and the scent of rain and smoke filled her senses. For a fleeting moment, Evelyn felt something she hadn't in years: safety. When the shooting stopped, Taza crawled to the corner and retrieved her revolver. He checked the cylinder. 5 rounds left and tossed it to her. "You shoot?" "Well enough to keep my property," she said, gripping it tightly. He nodded once. "Then we fight together." They waited for the next move. Down below, boots thudded across the saloon floor, doors creaked, men shouted. Evelyn peered through the shattered glass. A figure was approaching through the pale morning mist, tall, broad, with a yellow beard and a long coat dripping with rain. Boone, even from this distance. She could see the cruel smirk on his face. "I told you," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "He always comes." Taza's hand tightened around his knife. "Then today he leaves." As Boone stepped onto the porch, the world seemed to still. The morning air held its breath, and even the horses down the street went silent. Evelyn and Taza exchanged a single look of pact. Unspoken but unbreakable. Whatever happened next would bind their fates forever, and somewhere deep inside, Evelyn realized that the price of that $15 had just begun to reveal itself. The rain came without warning, fat drops pounding the dust, turning the town's silence into a rhythm of chaos. Evelyn stood at her window, her velvet curtain half drawn, watching the Apache Cale walk alone through the storm. His hair, long and dark, clung to his shoulders, his skin glistening with the desert rain. Even from behind the glass, she could feel the energy that came off him like thunder in human form. For days, whispers had filled the town. Some said Evelyn had lost her mind, inviting a native warrior into her mansion. Others said she was lonely, haunted by ghosts of old love. No one knew the truth, not even Evelyn herself. When Cale reached her porch, he didn't knock. He simply looked up at the window, his gaze cutting through the glass and into her heart. Evelyn hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she opened the door. He entered quietly, leaving muddy footprints across her expensive rug. The air thickened. She could smell the rain and smoke on his skin, and it stirred something deep inside her, a longing she didn't want to name. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You told me to pay," Cale replied, his deep voice steady. "I brought $15. He reached into his pouch and placed the bills on her mahogany table. They were soaked through, curling at the edges, but she could see they were real. Evelyn stared at the money, then at him. "It wasn't about the money," she whispered. Cale's dark eyes flickered with something: pain, or maybe understanding. "Then why ask for it?" She couldn't answer. The truth was, she had asked for payment to protect her heart, to make what she wanted from him feel like a transaction, not a confession of loneliness. But Cale, with his quiet strength, stripped all the pretense away. He moved closer. The fire in the hearth cast an amber glow across his chest, revealing scars, old, pale lines carved by battles long past. Evelyn reached out without thinking, tracing one with her fingertips. "Who did this?" she asked. "My people call them the scars of living," he said softly. "Each one is a memory." Evelyn swallowed hard. "You've suffered much." Cale tilted his head slightly. "And you?" Her eyes darted to the portrait above the fireplace, her late husband, stern-faced, holding a rifle. "Enough to understand silence," she murmured. They stood there for a long moment, the sound of the storm wrapping around the house like a cloak. Then Cale reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent. "You are not like them," he said. "You look at me without fear." She smiled sadly. "That's not true." "I'm terrified." "Of me?" "No," she said, stepping closer until their breath mingled. "Of myself." Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, the world seemed to hold its breath. Cale's hand hovered at her cheek, uncertain, as if waiting for her permission. Evelyn closed her eyes, and that was all the answer he needed. His lips brushed hers softly, hesitantly at first. Then, with the hunger of two souls who had waited too long to be seen, but just as quickly, she pulled away, her eyes wet not from rain but tears. "This isn't right," she whispered. "They'll destroy you if they find you here." Cale's jaw tightened. "Let them try." Evelyn turned from him, her heart pounding. "You don't understand. They already suspect me of betraying my own kind. They'll burn this house before they let a man like you cross its threshold again." Cale stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then I will meet them in the open. I do not hide from cowards." His defiance stirred something fierce inside her. "And if you die for it?" He looked at her then, eyes blazing. "Then I will die knowing I lived once." The room fell silent, except for the crackle of fire and the whisper of rain. Evelyn stared at the warrior before her, this man who had walked through prejudice, storm, and silence to reach her, and for the first time in years. She felt alive. But beyond the window, in the shadows of the wet street, figures were moving, townsmen, lanterns, voices whispering her name. The storm outside had only just begun, and soon it would come for both of them. Evelyn's heart pounded as the first knock thundered through the mansion. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the kind that carried judgment, the kind that said, "We know what you've done." Cale stood near the fireplace, his body half shadowed, the firelight flickering across the muscles of his back. The storm still howled outside, and every flash of lightning illuminated his face calm, unreadable, but alert like a wolf listening for danger. "Stay hidden," Evelyn whispered. "Please." He shook his head. "I will not hide." "You don't understand, Cale," she said, her voice trembling. "These men, they're not here to talk. They'll kill you just for standing in this house." Cale turned to her, his long black hair dripping onto the rug, his expression steady. "Then let them try." Another heavy knock. Then the door handle rattled. Evelyn's throat went dry. She could already hear voices outside, men from the town, their tones sharp and accusing. "She's got him in there." One of them shouted. Cale's hand went to the knife strapped to his belt. Evelyn rushed to him, grabbing his arm. "No, please. Don't fight them. It'll only make it worse." He looked down at her, his dark eyes softening. "You would have me stand still and die?" "I would have you live," she said, her voice breaking. "For me." Something in those words silenced him. He lowered the knife slowly. Outside, the men were growing impatient. Evelyn walked to the door, her bare feet silent against the wood floor. Her red dress swayed behind her like a drop of blood in candlelight. She opened the door just enough to face them. There were 5 of them, Sheriff Darnell among them, his face hard with suspicion. Rain poured down his hat brim as he held up a lantern. "Evenin', Miss Evelyn," he said, his tone sharp. "We had reports of a savage seen near your property. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Evelyn's lips trembled. "You think I'd bring a man like that here? In my home?" Darnell squinted past her shoulder, trying to see inside. "People saw tracks led in straight to your door." "Tracks get washed away in rain," she said softly. "Maybe your men followed ghosts." The sheriff didn't move. His eyes slid over her face, down to the faint dampness on her gown, then back up again. "You know what they say, Miss Evelyn. A rich woman alone gets desperate." Her pulse spiked. "Get off my porch, Sheriff." The men exchanged glances. Then Darnell took a step forward. "You sure you want to make an enemy of the law, ma'am?" Before she could answer, another flash of lightning filled the room, and in that instant, Cale stepped from the shadows. His bare chest gleamed like bronze fire, his hair wild, his eyes fierce and unflinching. The storm framed him like a spirit of the mountains. The men froze. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then one of them cursed. "There he is." Guns were drawn in seconds. Evelyn screamed, "No!" and threw herself between Cale and the door. "You'll have to shoot me first." Cale's hand came to her shoulder, gently pushing her behind him. "Enough," he said quietly, his deep voice carrying over the rain. "You want me, then take me." "But she is innocent." The sheriff's hand shook as he aimed his revolver. "You're trespassing in a white woman's house. Ain't no innocence left in this." Cale's gaze hardened, his body still as stone. "Then I pity your kind." The silence that followed was heavy as thunder. Then, from somewhere in the distance, came the echo of horses, many horses riding fast through the storm. The sheriff's eyes darted toward the sound. "What in?" Evelyn's breath caught. Cale's lips curved into something between pride and warning. "My people," he said softly. "They come when one of us is hunted." Moments later, dark silhouettes emerged from the rain-mounted Apache warriors, their torches blazing like fire in the storm. The men on Evelyn's porch stumbled back, their courage breaking. "Go," Cale said, turning to Evelyn. "Lock the door. Do not look back. I can't let you face them alone." He looked at her one last time, his eyes burning with something wordless. "You already gave me what no one else could, one night where I was not a ghost." And before she could stop him, he stepped out into the storm, the door slamming shut behind him. Through the sound of thunder, Evelyn pressed her hand to the wood, tears spilling down her face. She could hear shouting, gunfire, the clash of men, and rain. $15 had bought her a night. But love, real love, was demanding payment she could never repay. Lightning split the sky as Cale stepped into the storm, his bare chest gleaming under the violent flashes of light. The rain beat against his skin, but he didn't flinch. The world around him was chaos shouts from the townsmen, the distant thunder of hooves, and Evelyn's muffled sobs from behind the locked door. He moved with purpose, each stride steady and unhurried, like a warrior who had already made peace with death. Sheriff Darnell shouted from the porch, "Put down your knife, savage." His voice cracked with fear more than authority. Cale didn't answer. He stood tall in the center of the muddy street, rain pouring down his long black hair, his tribal jewelry shimmering faintly under the lightning. His people, Apache riders, were emerging from the darkness, their faces painted with red and white, eyes sharp as hawks. The townsmen, realizing they were outnumbered, began to panic. Guns wavered in trembling hands. Horses snorted nervously. Darnell barked, "Hold your ground." But his own voice betrayed him. Cale raised his hand, not in threat, but in warning. "Leave this place," he said in a calm, deep tone that carried through the storm. "Go home to your wives and children. This is not your fight." The sheriff spat. You think you can walk into our town, take our women, and lecture us about honor? Cale's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Behind him, one of the Apache riders dismounted, a younger warrior with braids and a painted face. Cale, he called in their native tongue, they are afraid. Let us end this. Cale turned slightly, rain running down his temple. No blood tonight. Not for me. But fate had other plans. A gunshot cracked through the rain. One man, nervous and shaking, pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through the storm and struck Cale's shoulder. He staggered back, his hand instinctively gripping the wound. Cale! The young warrior shouted, charging forward with a war cry that shook the earth. In an instant, chaos erupted. Arrows flew, gunfire roared, and the street turned to mud and blood. Cale dropped to one knee, his vision blurring as rain mixed with crimson on his skin. Inside the mansion, Evelyn screamed his name. She threw open the door, running barefoot into the storm. Cale! She fell beside him, her hands shaking as she tried to press against his wound. No, stay with me, you hear me? He looked up at her through the rain, his lips parting in a faint smile. You shouldn't have come. I won't let you die. She cried, her voice breaking. Not like this. Not because of me. The Apache warriors formed a circle around them, shielding them from the townsmen. The rain began to ease, turning into a heavy mist. Cale's people looked to him, waiting for his word, their loyalty unbroken even as the storm faded. Take her inside, one of them said. We'll handle the rest. Cale shook his head weakly. No, she stays. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she tore a strip from her dress and pressed it against his shoulder. Hold on, Cale, please. He winced but didn't pull away. You're not afraid anymore. She let out a breathless laugh through her tears. I never was. I was just pretending. Around them, the fight quieted. The townsmen, realizing they were outnumbered and outmatched, began to retreat. Sheriff Darnell dropped his gun and backed away, eyes wide with disbelief. You'll regret this, woman, he spat before stumbling into the darkness. Cale tried to stand, but his strength faltered. Evelyn caught him, her arms wrapping around his chest. His warmth, his heartbeat, it was all too real to lose. Stay, she whispered. Just stay. He touched her face with his trembling hand, his thumb brushing away the rain or maybe her tears. You gave me one night of peace. That was enough. No, she said fiercely. It's not enough. You're not leaving me. The young Apache approached, placing a hand on Cale's other shoulder. We must go. The soldiers will come when they hear the shots. Evelyn's eyes widened. Soldiers? Cale nodded faintly. They will burn this town to find me. Then I'll go with you, she said without hesitation. Cale's eyes locked on hers, astonishment flickering into something deeper. You'd leave all this? Your house, your gold, your name? Evelyn smiled through tears. None of it ever meant anything. You did. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Cale nodded slowly. Then ride with us. The Apache warriors helped him to his horse, while Evelyn climbed onto another, her red dress clinging to her soaked body. As they rode into the dark horizon, the last sound behind them was the echo of thunder fading into silence. The richest woman in town was now a fugitive beside the man who had once been worth $15 and everything she had ever wanted. The dawn broke soft and golden over the desert, the storm long gone. The sky stretched endless above, painted in orange and lavender hues. The world felt reborn, washed clean by rain and blood. Evelyn rode behind Cale, her arms wrapped gently around his waist, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. He was alive, but barely. The Apache horses moved swiftly through the canyon, their hooves silent on the damp earth. Smoke still rose from the distant town they had fled, a reminder of what they had left behind. Evelyn didn't look back. There was nothing there for her anymore. Cale's head tilted slightly as he spoke, his voice weak but steady. "You shouldn't have come with me." She tightened her arms around him. "If I hadn't, I'd be living half a life. I made my choice, Cale." He was quiet for a while, watching the rising sun cut across the rocks. "My people won't trust you easily. To them, you're a symbol of everything that took from us." "I don't need their trust," she said softly. "Just your truth." Cale turned his head enough to meet her gaze. "Truth?" "That you meant what you said. That night," she whispered. "That you didn't just see me as a woman in a red dress." He smiled faintly, the corners of his lips twitching through pain. "You were never just that." By midday, they reached a valley where the Apache camp waited, a hidden refuge surrounded by red cliffs and wild sage. Warriors stood as they arrived, their faces stern. Children peeked from behind tents, wide-eyed at the sight of the pale woman clinging to their wounded leader. One of the older warriors stepped forward, a man with gray braids and a beaded necklace that spoke of authority. "Cale," he said gravely in their tongue, "you return wounded, and you bring her?" Cale dismounted slowly, grimacing as pain shot through his arm. Evelyn rushed to help him, but he waved her off gently. "She saved my life," he said. The elder's eyes flicked to her, unreadable. "Or cost you everything." The camp murmured. Evelyn stood still, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of 100 stares, some curious, others filled with resentment. She met each one without lowering her gaze. Cale spoke again, his voice rising. "She stood between me and their bullets. She defied her own kind. If that means nothing, then maybe I have lived for nothing." The elder held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You've earned the right to decide your own path, Cale, but remember, when two worlds meet, one always burns." Cale nodded. "Then let the old world burn." That night, the Apache lit a great fire in the center of the camp. Songs echoed through the canyon low, haunting melodies that told of loss, freedom, and defiance. Evelyn sat beside Cale, tending to his wound while the flames danced in his dark eyes. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "Leaving everything behind. Your home, your name, your people." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Home is where I can breathe without pretending. And people who would rather see me dead than human, I don't call them mine." He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. "You are brave." "No," she said softly. "I'm just tired of being afraid." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sparks rise into the night sky. Cale's breathing grew steadier, though pain lingered in his eyes. The sound of the drums and the soft rustle of wind through the canyon surrounded them like a heartbeat. Finally, Evelyn spoke again. "What will happen now?" Cale looked toward the fire. "We move, always. The army will come." "They always do." "Then I'll move with you," she said. He turned to her, his expression one of disbelief and admiration. "A lady of silk and gold, living in the wild with a hunted man?" She smiled. "A woman who once thought $15 could buy control of her life and found instead that it bought her freedom." Cale chuckled softly. "You talk like one of us now." She leaned closer, her forehead resting against his. "Maybe I always was." In that quiet moment, the firelight wrapped around them like a blessing. The world outside their circle still hated what they represented: an Apache warrior and a white woman bound by something deeper than fear or judgment. But here, under the stars, they were simply two souls who had refused to belong to anything but each other. As the night deepened, Cale's tribe began to accept her presence little by little. A child brought her a blanket. An elder handed her a piece of roasted corn. She smiled through tears, realizing she was being seen not as an intruder, but as part of something larger. Cale watched her quietly, pride shining through his exhaustion. "They are beginning to understand," he said. "What?" she asked. "That even in a world built on hate," he said softly, "love can still survive." When dawn returned, the fire was embers and the desert was silent again. Evelyn and Cale stood side by side at the canyon's edge, wind lifting her hair and his feathers alike. The horizon stretched wide, wild, and untamed like their future. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Not as the richest woman in town and the Apache warrior she charged $15, but as equals beneath the endless western sky.